This Vox video is really good. It's called Israeli Settlements Explained.
This is me
Dude, back when Johnny Harris wasn't a CIA agent.
driving in what I think is one of the most bizarre places in the world. I just crossed over from Israel into the West Bank. If you look at a map of where I'm driving right now, you'll see a jumbled mess of Palestinian towns and villages, which are shown in green, and Israeli settlements, which are in blue. Many people think of this territory as Palestine, but of the 3 million people living out here, almost 20% of them are Jewish Israeli citizens. The Israelis living out here are called settlers. They live in the West Bank, but they're citizens of Israel. As I drive, I'm looking at effectively two different nations woven into each other through decades of conflict. I visited 15 settlements all over the West Bank, talking to people who've decided to pack up and move out into the middle of disputed land. We'll meet them in coming videos, but first I want to take a look at the maps that help explain how the West Bank got to look like this. So let's go back to 1948 when the map looked a lot different. Back then, all this land was controlled by Great Britain. And due to growing tensions between Jews and Arabs,
and thanks to everyone in chat able to share information about these current events to those who don't know where to look.
Yeah, of course.
UN worked with Britain to split the land into two states, one for Jews, Israel, and another one for Arabs, Palestine. The Jews in the region accepted this plan and declared independence of the state of Israel. But the Arab states in the region saw this plan as just more European colonialism. They didn't accept the plan and instead declared war on Israel. Israel won the war, pushing well past the borders of the UN plan. During the peace negotiations, a ceasefire line was drawn in green ink. It became known as the Green Line. It wasn't necessarily a border, it was just a ceasefire line, with this being the state of Israel, and this section being controlled by Jordan, who had taken control of it during the war. The Jordanians named this newly seized land the West Bank because it was west of the Jordan River. The fragile ceasefire remained until 1967, when Israel fought another war with its Arab neighbors. Israel wasn't looking to take over land in this war, but in just 6 days of fighting, it blew past the Green Line and seized a whole swath of land, including the entire West Bank. Suddenly, Israel had a decision to make. Do they make the West Bank a part of Israel and give the 1.1 million Arabs living there Israeli citizenship and voting rights? Do they give the land back to their enemy Jordan? Or else do they let the people create their own Palestinian state? This became a major debate in Israeli politics. Many Israelis saw this war they just won as not just a military victory, but a religious sign that the Jews were meant to return to the place where a huge amount of Jewish history happened. The hills of the ancient Judea and Samaria, which is basically the entire West Bank. So while the government was debating what to do, Israeli civilians began moving into the West Bank without any permission from the government. They just started setting up homes, establishing a Jewish presence in this region. Suddenly, any debate about what to do with the West Bank had to take into account the growing number of Israeli civilians that were living there. But
This is still a little CIA coded.
The world did not approve of this. As the settler presence grew, the UN issued a resolution saying that the settlements had no legal validity and that they constitute a serious obstruction to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle
I also thought this was a different video, I'm not gonna lie. I made a mistake.
East. They were basically saying that this settler activity was totally illegal. Two different narratives emerged here. One said that Jewish civilians were moving on to mostly empty plots of land that they had captured in a war, and that had deep historical and spiritual significance to them. The other side, which is the side that most of the world took, said that these settlers were colonizing land to expand their nation. In spite of international condemnation, the number of settlers in the West Bank grew. Over the next few decades, more and more factions of the Israeli government began to support the settler movement, allocating public resources and granting permits for building. The Israeli Housing Ministry and military began developing plans on how to develop the West Bank. They built roads throughout the entire region, allowing easy access between the settlements and mainland Israel.
Okay, this is the part that I was waiting for. I think this talks about how most of the roads that exist in the West Bank are heavily enforced so that only Israelis can use any roads that they want, but the Palestinians can only use certain roads. And if you have a Palestinian plate, you aren't allowed to. You aren't allowed to pass certain checkpoints.
More and more building permits were given out, and planned communities began popping up all over the West Bank. The settlements slowly shifted from a fringe group of motivated civilians to an institutionalized part of Israeli society, totally supported by the state. Here are the Palestinian towns in the West Bank. Watch how the settlements weave throughout these Palestinian towns. Palestinians didn't like this encroachment. They began protesting, often with extreme violence. Between the violence, the condemnations from the international community of the settlements, the situation became unsustainable. So, in the mid-1990s, American President Bill Clinton, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat signed the Oslo Accords, agreements that established a Palestinian government and split the West Bank into 3 sections. Area A gave Palestinians total control over security and government. This makes up about 18% of the West Bank, but most of the Palestinian population centers are here. This was a big deal because it gave Palestinians self-rule for the first time. Area B was designated for Palestinian government control while retaining Israeli security control, meaning the Israeli military remains very present there. Area B is about 22% of the West Bank. Area C remained completely under the Israeli military and government control. This is where all the settlements are, in Area C, and it's about 60% of the West Bank. So this is basically how we ended up with this mess of a map. Israelis can come and go from mainland Israel through really nice roads that go straight to the settlements. They call these roads flyovers because they bypass Palestinian villages and give easy access from one settlement to the other. But not every settlement has one of these flyover roads. Palestinians can drive on almost all the roads in the West Bank, but their movement is often more difficult, more restricted. They have to stop and check.
No, they can't drive on all the roads.
Points and get their car inspected sometimes. Sometimes it makes for some really long lines. But certainly one of the most difficult aspects of this carved up land situation is how it hinders Palestinians from being able to build an economy. Area C, which is under Israeli control.
Jesus Christ. Okay, that's enough of that, Jesus. One point I honestly talked about as much as how the land is historically Jewish land. How do you balance that with the modern populations in the region? Obviously, what modern Israel is doing is important and wrong, but they were first there historically. I do not believe that land belongs to people. There is no land that can belong to people. If there are settlements in a location and you are encroaching on the people that are currently living there, it's not about the land, it's about the fact that you are pushing out the indigenous people in that land. Okay? Both of these things can exist in the same universe. Land is just a part of the planet Earth. We can't own land. We can pretend like it. We can make a whole economy and a market for it and real estate and all this stupid other shit. But you can't. People don't own land. There's no piece of land on the earth that belongs to a certain group of people. That's not how that works. Land just belongs to everyone. We all live on this planet. You know? Like, obviously, I'm not saying stop paying your property taxes and be like, well, land doesn't belong to anyone. Obviously, yeah, we live in a society, whatever. But this concept that, well, the Israelis were there first and it's their holy land, so we should give it back to them. Huh? No. What? No. Yeah, by that chatter's logic, America has to pack it up and piss off back to Europe. Yeah. It's about whether or not you are occupying a territory in a way that the people who currently live there are upset about. You're not allowed to be like, well, we called dibs on this one, so now we're allowed to, genocide all of you guys to take back our land. No, fuck no. People's lives, people's cultures and lives are more important. We'll stick with just lives to make this very simple. People's lives are more important than some arbitrary, like, thousands of years ago. people of our ethnicity had this land. No. You think it is acceptable to murder millions of people so you can just have some stupid piece of land? That's also according to religious documents which are invalid, and also that was thousands of years ago. Even if we go with the religious reasons, it's insane logic. Yeah. Also, I think there's a difference between 150 years ago versus 5,000 years ago. Of course, it just has to do with whether or not there are currently people living in that location. You know? If there are people currently living in that location, millions of people, and that's their territory, and you're saying, no, we don't want to just live with you guys here. We want to exterminate you, and we want to live here. No, that's not acceptable. No. If there are still people living there, you can't just fucking genocide them and take it and be like, well, technically we have the God-given right to do that. No. Disagree. We will get back to the news really quickly. I just wanted to cover like a couple quick like infographics, I guess, so people can understand. We did it to Native Americans, yeah, and that's why it was unbelievably abhorrent, and that's why we shouldn't be occupying as much land as we occupy in the United States. The amount of land that we gave indigenous people in the US as an apology is a joke. It's a fucking joke. Okay? It's they should have way more territory than we gave them. Arabs wouldn't have cared at all if European Jews were coming to Palestine just to live there with them, but they started colonizing instead of just living.
As an American Jew of Eastern European descent, I have more of a legal right to live in Jerusalem or the West Bank than someone whose family has been there for hundreds of years.
Stop. The Arabs wouldn't have cared. Exactly, yes. Then they started colonizing them instead of just living alongside them. There's some pretty good resources. I'm not sure if anyone has them on hand, but there's good resources that show that historically, actually, that region was comprised of a lot of Jewish people and Arab, like Muslim people, who were fine with living with each other. It's that the state of Israel is not trying to coincide or live with the Palestinians that are there. They want to take the territory. They want all of the Palestinians to shut up. And they want them to either die or get the fuck out. But there were Jewish people living in that region for a long time. And there was no like violence or whatever. Arab Jews, Arab Christians, and Arab Muslims, like 20% of the Palestinians are Christians. Yeah. So, anywho. Okay. But this is a good infographic here. The water in Palestine, Palestinians in the West Bank must buy water from Israel's national water company, Mekara, which appropriates 80% of the West Bank water supply. Israel came into Palestine, said, this is our water supply and we're nationalizing it, and now you have to buy it from us, even though historically you've been using the water the whole time. Nestle-type behavior. Access. Israel maintains over 98 fixed checkpoints and hundreds of random flying checkpoints in the West Bank, choking Palestinian freedom of movement. Currency. Today there is no Palestinian currency. Everyone uses the Israeli shekel. Israel is capable of blocking any future attempts to create a Palestinian currency. Israel has prevented Palestinians from accessing oil and gas reserves on their own territory, making them dependent on Israel for energy needs. So again, they did the same thing. Again. And so on and so forth. These are all. This one also importing and exporting. All Palestinian imports go through the Israeli customs system. Israeli authorities can block any import from reaching its recipient. Okay. Nice. Cool. Very cool stuff. Any travel outside of Palestine/Israel requires Israeli permission. There is no way of entering or leaving without crossing an Israeli-controlled border. And this is also, in my opinion, a very good infographic that shows the problem with water currently. This is how much water, how many liters of water Israeli settlers are given. Each, like a water tank or whatever, is supposed to be 10 liters a day. So Israelis get 369 liters a day, the settlers. The Palestinians who live in the West Bank get 73 liters a day. And if you live in the Gaza Strip, 90 liters a day, and most of it is contaminated water. You live on the Gaza Strip? 80%, 80 to 90% of your water that you are given so graciously by the Israeli government is contaminated water. It's not even clean water. Like, this idea that these two countries, they're just trying to coexist. Like Israel, they just want to coexist with, you know, the Palestinians, but the Palestinians are just violent and they keep trying to kill us. What about the part where you don't give them any fucking water? You don't give them fucking clean water. What about the part where you don't give them food? What about the part that you don't let them import anything? This is super fucked. I had no idea it was this bad. It's very bad. Water injustice, Palestine. Yeah, no, there's a million resources on the water injustices that are occurring in Palestine right now, today. It's very depressing. Because people will pay,